No-cap communism, Stigmergy beyond academic real socialism. Abstract, this paper proposes a novel framework, no-cap communism, to transcend the limitations of prevalent academic discussions on real socialism. The abstract concept of no-cap challenges the restrictions imposed by existing schools of thought, ushering in a paradigm shift beyond restrained realist perspectives. The paper draws on the concept of Stigmergy, referencing the self-organizing properties of international organization for standardization, to illustrate how unforeseen collaborations and societal structures can emerge from uncoordinated actions. By applying this concept to the realm of economics and social organization, no-cap communism envisions a future unbound by the constraints of traditional planning mechanisms. The paper contends that current discourses on real socialism are often hamstrung by a preoccupation with the failures of historical implementations. No-cap communism seeks to move beyond this limiting focus, ushering in a new era of theoretical exploration untainted by the baggage of the past. Keywords: political linguistics. Real socialism, Stigmergy, self-organizing systems, unforeseen collaborations, traditional planning, historical baggage. Lay summary: this paper explores a term, no-cap communism, as a framework for discussing socialist societies beyond the constraints of past ideas. No-cap acts as a linguistic challenge, derived from slang meaning without limitations, pushing past the boundaries of traditional academic discourse. The paper draws on Stigmergy, a concept from social entomology, highlighting how unplanned interactions within insect colonies lead to complex structures. This anthropological term is used as an analogy, suggesting that unforeseen collaborations and social systems might emerge from individual actions in a socialist economy. A potential conflict of interest exists due to your personal or professional connections that could reasonably be perceived as influencing your views and conclusions. However, I strive to approach the topic from a neutral and objective standpoint, with the utmost professionalism and integrity. The exact wording can depend on your individual circumstances, but the key principle here is to acknowledge the potential for bias and disclose any relevant connections that may exist. This ensures transparency and helps to maintain the trust of readers. Conflicts of interests can exist due to the author's connections with individuals that may be relevant to the subject of this paper. This includes professional or personal ties that could reasonably be perceived as influencing the author's views and conclusions. No-cap communism, Stigmergy beyond academic real socialism. In such a natural product as this, every part is thought as owing its presence to the agency of all the remaining parts, and also as existing for the sake of the others and of the whole, that is, as an instrument, or organ. The part must be an organ producing the other parts, each, consequently, reciprocally producing the others. Only under these conditions and upon these terms can such a product be an organized and self-organized being, and, as such, be called a physical end. Immanuel Kant. An infinite regress is a concept that comes up in philosophy and logic. It refers to a situation where an explanation for something relies on another explanation, which itself relies on yet another explanation, and so on, in an endless loop. This chain of explanations never reaches a stopping point, leaving the original thing unexplained. It's like a domino chain that keeps going forever, with each domino tipping over because of the domino before it. In an infinite regress, each explanation depends on the one before it, but none of them provide a solid foundation. The issue with infinite regress is that it doesn't provide a satisfactory explanation. It just keeps pushing the question back a step further without ever resolving it. Imagine someone asks why you believe the earth is round. You might say, because science tells me so. But then they ask why you trust science. You might say, because scientists are experts. but then they ask why you trust experts. This questioning could go on forever, with no clear endpoint. While International Standards itself is a non-governmental organization (NGO), its standards are often adopted by national governments as a basis for their own regulations. This creates a level of international consensus on various technical and safety requirements, promoting smoother global trade and economic integration. Overall, ISO acts as a behind-the-scenes facilitator of globalism by establishing a common language for international trade, promoting quality, safety, and efficiency in global supply chains. Even though there's no single ISO for globalism, the entire ecosystem of ISO standards plays a significant role in supporting a more interconnected global marketplace. ISO 26000 is like a guidebook for organizations that want to be socially responsible. It's not a set of rules, but rather a framework to help them consider the impact they have on various groups and the environment. The key idea is that organizations should integrate social responsibility throughout everything they do. This means being transparent and accountable, and working with stakeholders, which are those affected by the organization's actions. The humanities play a vital role in third world countries, also known as developing countries. Help document and preserve the rich cultural traditions, languages, and histories of developing countries. This is especially important in the face of globalization and homogenization. The humanities can help address social issues like poverty, inequality, and human rights abuses. By studying these issues from different perspectives, humanities scholars can develop more effective solutions, teaching critical thinking skills, which are essential for analyzing complex issues and developing informed opinions. This is important for citizens in developing countries who are working to improve their societies. Also helps promote understanding and tolerance between different cultures. This is important in a globalized world where people from different backgrounds are increasingly interacting with each other. The term First World is a bit outdated, but it generally refers to countries that are highly developed and wealthy. It's important to note that the term First World is kind of a relic of the Cold War era. The term real socialism is used to refer to the socialist economic and political systems that existed in the Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc countries during the 20th century. It's also sometimes called actually existing socialism. The economies were centrally planned by the state, rather than driven by a market system. The means of production, factories, farms, etc., were owned by the state. These countries were one-party states with limited political freedoms. The term real socialism arose partly as a way to distinguish these existing socialist states from the more theoretical ideas about socialism that had been put forward by thinkers like Karl Marx. It's important to note that there's debate about how well these countries actually reflected socialist ideals. Critics argue that they were bureaucratic and undemocratic, and that they didn't achieve true economic equality. Eusociality describes the most complex level of social organization in animals. Adults raise young that aren't necessarily their own offspring. Grandma, parents, and kids all live together and contribute to the colony. There's a clear division of labor. Some individuals are queen bees or royalty of some sort who focus on reproduction, while others are worker bees, the commoners who handle chores like construction and food collection. These worker bees are often sterile, meaning they can't reproduce themselves. These three key features, cooperative brood care, overlapping generations, and a reproductive caste system, are what define a eusocial society. In eusocial animals like ants or bees, workers share a lot of genes with the queen's offspring. By helping raise the queen's young, they indirectly pass on their own genes. There's safety in numbers. Eusocial colonies can better defend themselves from predators and find resources. Animal testing is a controversial issue, with strong arguments on both sides. Here's a breakdown of the main justification for testing on animals before humans. It's considered unethical to directly expose people to potential risks, especially for untested drugs or procedures. Animals can be used to assess the safety of a treatment before it's given to humans. This helps identify and avoid harmful side effects. Many animals, especially mammals, share physiological systems with humans. This allows researchers to study how a drug or treatment might affect similar systems in people. Researchers can control an animal's environment and genetics more precisely than with humans. This allows for focused study of cause and effect without confounding variables. Animal results don't always translate perfectly to humans due to biological differences. A treatment that appears safe and effective in animals might have negative effects in people. Advances in cell cultures, computer modeling, and other technologies are offering more alternatives to animal testing. Most scientists would agree with the critical view expressed in Problems of Biological Physics Springer-Verlag, 1981 by the biophysicist L. A. Blumenfeld, when he wrote, "The meaningful macroscopic ordering of biological structure does not arise due to the increase of certain parameters or a system above their critical values. These structures are built according to program-like complicated architectural structures, the meaningful information created during many billions of years of chemical and biological evolution being used. Life is a consequence of microscopic, not macroscopic, organization." Heinz Pagels, in a 1985 review of Ilya Prigozhin and Isabel Stengers's book Order Out of Chaos. The term Stigmergy was coined by French biologist Pierre-Paul Gros in 1959. It comes from the Greek word stigma, mark, sign, and ergon, work, action. Stigmergy theories deal with how indirect communication through the environment can lead to complex collective behavior. The stigma can be explained through non-linguistics through initial chaos theory foresight. Unlike direct communication like orders or instructions in higher-order qualitative and quantitative linguistics, Stigmergy relies on agents like insects or even people leaving traces in their environment that influence the actions of others. These traces, often called stigmata, can create positive and negative feedback loops. As more agents interact with the environment, the traces become more pronounced, attracting even more agents and further shaping the overall outcome. Law of attraction. As energy proponents say, we emit energy that vibrates at a certain frequency, attracting similar energy back to us. But it requires a certain amount of physics to achieve any desired results. In short, they Prigozhin and Stengers maintain that time irreversibility is not derived from a time-independent microworld, but is itself fundamental. The virtue of their idea is that it resolves what they perceive as a clash of doctrines about the nature of time in physics. Most physicists would agree that there is neither empirical evidence to support their view, nor is there a mathematical necessity for it. There is no clash of doctrines. Only Prigozhin and a few colleagues hold to these speculations which, in spite of their efforts, continue to live in the twilight zone of scientific credibility. L. A. Blumenfeld, a classic example is ant foraging. Ants lay down pheromones as they explore for food. The more ants follow a path, the stronger the pheromone trail becomes. This, in turn, attracts more ants, leading to a highly efficient path to the food source. In a way, signal economies mimic how ants leverage pheromones. Just like strong pheromone trails attract more ants, strong positive signals, reviews, likes in an economy attract more users and further amplify those signals. Academic economies refer to the system of incentives, resources, and priorities that shape the research and teaching activities within universities and colleges. Universities rely on a variety of funding sources, including government grants, tuition fees, and private donations. Work and action of a universal coordination mechanism is the opposite of chirality for traffic flow stigmergy. It is an attempt of socially necessary labor required to produce it, or merit, where the labor market is divided into segments with different characteristics: wages, skills, working conditions. The three-phase traffic theory is a model developed by physicist Boris Kerner to explain traffic flow, particularly how free-flowing traffic transitions into congestion. Vehicles move unimpeded at relatively high speeds, with space between them. Traffic becomes denser, and vehicles travel in bursts of acceleration and deceleration, often referred to as stop-and-go traffic. Speeds are lower than free flow. Traffic comes to a standstill or crawls at a very slow speed. This congestion can stretch for long distances. The theory emphasizes the phase transition from free flow to synchronized flow, which Kerner proposes happens probabilistically within a metastable free flow state. The synchronized flow acts as a precursor to congestion, with stop-and-go patterns eventually leading to a wide-moving jam. This model offers a more nuanced view of traffic flow compared to traditional approaches that rely solely on a single fundamental diagram relating traffic density and flow rate. Ant colony optimization translates this concept into algorithms that can tackle complex optimization problems, like scheduling or routing, by finding the best path through a vast set of possibilities. Inspired by the flocking behavior of birds, particle swarm optimization imagines a swarm of particles moving through a search space. Each particle remembers its own best position and the best position discovered by the entire swarm. Particles then adjust their movements based on this information, collectively converging towards the optimal solution. PSO is useful for solving continuous optimization problems in engineering or finance. Foraging draws inspiration from how E. coli bacteria efficiently search for nutrients. Here, artificial bees scout for potential solutions like flower patches and communicate their findings through a virtual dance language. Artificial fish in the model follow simple rules like staying close to neighbors, and avoiding collisions. Virtual Stigmergy is the application of Stigmergy principles in a digital environment. Just like in nature, virtual Stigmergy relies on indirect communication through leaving traces in the environment to influence the behavior of others. Instead of physical pheromones, virtual Stigmergy uses digital traces left behind by agents, often software programs or users in a virtual environment. By interacting with these digital traces, other agents can adjust their behavior, leading to the emergence of complex collective outcomes. Virtual Stigmergy can be applied to large systems with many agents, making it suitable for complex simulations or online platforms with numerous users. Since communication is indirect, the system can adapt to changes in the environment or the behavior of the agents. Simple interactions based on virtual traces can lead to the emergence of surprisingly complex collective behaviors. In a distributed computing system, virtual Stigmergy can be used to assign tasks to different computers. Since nature works for a determinate end under the direction of a higher agent, whatever is done by nature must needs be traced back to God, as to its first cause. So also whatever is done voluntarily must also be traced back to some higher cause other than human reason or will, since these can change or fail, for all things that are changeable and capable of defect must be traced back to an immovable and self-necessary first principle, as was shown in the body of the article. Thomas Aquinas 12,255–1274 Summa Theologica. Cap and no cap are a pair of slang terms used to indicate truthfulness. Cap itself means a lie or something false. No cap, on the other hand, means no lie or for real. It's basically emphasizing that you're being truthful. Commonism and communism are different. While communism is based on the concept of collective ownership of goods and resources, commonism stresses the importance of common resources and shared responsibilities. It also places emphasis on smaller-scale communities and individuals rather than on large-scale institutions like the state. Communism promises economic equality and social welfare. However, they often lack political freedoms and economic innovation. Communism and commonism share some similarities but also many differences. Commonism has a more decentralized, fluid structure and stresses localism and sustainability. It is also more community-oriented, with a focus on individual needs and priorities. Commonism is a more flexible and sustainable form of socio-economic system. In Tick v. Carrington 1765, this case established the principle that a homeowner has a right to privacy in their home. The court ruled that a warrant was required to enter a home, even to search for stolen goods. Donoghue v. Stevenson 1932, this case established the duty of care in negligence law. The court ruled that a manufacturer has a duty to take reasonable care to avoid causing injury to consumers who use their products. Miranda v. Arizona 1966, this landmark decision of the U.S. Supreme Court established the Miranda rights, which protect criminal suspects from self-incrimination during custodial interrogation. Discrete and continuous conservation are two ways to express the fundamental principle that a certain quantity remains constant within a closed system. The key difference lies in how we view the system and the quantity being conserved. This applies to systems that can be treated as continuous mediums, meaning their properties vary smoothly throughout space and time. Examples include fluids, gases, energy, and momentum. Conservation laws in continuous systems are often expressed using mathematical equations involving derivatives and integrals. These equations describe how the conserved quantity flows or changes within the system. This applies to systems made up of distinct, countable entities. Here, the conserved quantity is tracked for each individual entity. Examples include populations of animals, objects on a conveyor belt, or data packets in a network. Conservation laws in discrete systems are often expressed using algebraic equations or bookkeeping methods. These methods track how the conserved quantity changes as entities move, interact, or are destroyed. Def exponential _ growth population, growth _ rate, time step. Simulates population growth over time using exponential function. Args, population, initial population size. Growth _ rate, growth rate positive number. Time step for each iteration. Returns, a list of population sizes after each time step. Population _ history equals. For _ in range time step, population equals 1 plus growth _ rate. Population _ history. Append population. Return population _ history. Informational privacy theory focuses on an individual's right to control their personal information. It emphasizes the ability to decide who has access to this information, how it's used, and under what circumstances it can be disclosed. Privacy as seclusion emphasizes the right to be free from intrusion and surveillance. It highlights the importance of having physical and psychological space where one can be alone and undisturbed. Privacy as autonomy theory connects privacy to individual liberty. It argues that privacy is essential for individuals to make their own choices and develop their sense of self without undue societal pressure or influence. Developed by Erwin Altman, this theory proposes privacy as a social process of managing social interactions. It suggests individuals use various strategies to control access to themselves and regulate the flow of information in their social world. Communication Privacy Management (CPM) theory introduced by Sandra Petronio, builds on Altman's work. It emphasizes how individuals negotiate and establish boundaries around their communication, disclosing private information strategically to build relationships. The tragedy of the commons applies to situations where a shared resource is available to everyone. According to Garrett Hardin, who wrote about this concept, individuals acting in their own self-interest will ultimately overuse and deplete the resource. This is because there's no incentive for any one person to conserve it if everyone else is using it freely. For example, if everyone overgrazes cattle on a common pasture, it can become barren. Common good is a concept that refers to the well-being of the entire community. Nonprofit operates for a social cause or purpose, not to generate financial profits for its members. Self-organizing functions without a formal hierarchy or centralized leadership. Decisions are made through collaboration and participation among members. Fragmented stigma is a concept that describes how stigma can be broken down into smaller, more specific prejudices. It's a way of understanding how stigma isn't always a monolithic force, but rather a collection of interconnected negative attitudes. Informational privacy theory focuses on an individual's right to control their personal information. It emphasizes the ability to decide who has access to this information, how it's used, and under what circumstances it can be disclosed. Privacy as seclusion emphasizes the right to be free from intrusion and surveillance. It highlights the importance of having physical and psychological space where one can be alone and undisturbed. Privacy as autonomy theory connects privacy to individual liberty. It argues that privacy is essential for individuals to make their own choices and develop their sense of self without undue societal pressure or influence. Developed by Erwin Altman, this theory proposes privacy as a social process of managing social interactions. It suggests individuals use various strategies to control access to themselves and regulate the flow of information in their social world. Communication Privacy Management (CPM) theory introduced by Sandra Petronio, builds on Altman's work. It emphasizes how individuals negotiate and establish boundaries around their communication, disclosing private information strategically to build relationships. The tragedy of the commons applies to situations where a shared resource is available to everyone. According to Garrett Hardin, who wrote about this concept, individuals acting in their own self-interest will ultimately overuse and deplete the resource. This is because there's no incentive for any one person to conserve it if everyone else is using it freely. For example, if everyone overgrazes cattle on a common pasture, it can become barren. Common good is a concept that refers to the well-being of the entire community. Nonprofit operates for a social cause or purpose, not to generate financial profits for its members. Self-organizing functions without a formal hierarchy or centralized leadership. Decisions are made through collaboration and participation among members. Fragmented stigma is a concept that describes how stigma can be broken down into smaller, more specific prejudices. It's a way of understanding how stigma isn't always a monolithic force, but rather a collection of interconnected negative attitudes. Eggs existed well before chickens. A bird very similar to a chicken, but not quite one, a proto-chicken, laid an egg. Due to mutations or interbreeding, this egg contained a chick with the genetic makeup of the first true chicken. Evolution is a slow process, so the proto-chicken probably wouldn't have been drastically different from a chicken. The other theory focuses on the unique proteins needed for a chicken egg. The ovacleidin 17 protein is crucial for forming the strong shell of a chicken egg, but it's only found in chickens. The paradox is, if a chicken egg needs a chicken protein, how could a non-chicken lay the first chicken egg? One explanation is that perhaps a very similar protein existed in the proto-chicken, enough to allow a shell to form but different enough to classify the offspring as the first true chicken. It was a long process of small changes, and at some point, an egg laid by a proto-chicken contained the first true chicken. Cybernetics transdisciplinary may be a reference to the concept of cybernetics as a transdisciplinary field that spans across various disciplines. Cybernetics is a field of study that focuses on the principles of control and communication in systems, whether natural or man-made. Transdisciplinarity is a term that refers to the process of integrating knowledge, methods, and ideas from multiple disciplines in order to address complex problems. Therefore, the phrase cybernetics transdiscipline might be a reference to the overlap between cybernetics and transdisciplinarity. Remember, these are systems that are open to an external flow of energy or matter. This energy flow keeps the system from reaching equilibrium and allows it to exhibit far from equilibrium behavior, often leading to complex patterns and self-organization. Imagine a system where the flow of energy itself acts as the Stigmergic cue. For instance, consider a system of chemical reactions where the concentration of certain products could guide the behavior of other molecules. Dissipative systems are constantly out of equilibrium. Teleology refers to the idea that things have a purpose or end goal. It comes from the Greek words telos end, purpose or goal, and logos, explanation or reason. So, a teleological explanation for something is one that focuses on its function or why it exists. Teleology is contrasted with causality, which focuses on how things come to be or what caused them. For example, if a scientist explains how a bird's wing developed through evolution, that's a causal explanation. But if they explain the wing's purpose as allowing the bird to fly, that's a teleological explanation. This means something has a purpose inherent to itself. This was a common idea in classical philosophy, where it was believed nature itself had a purpose. Extrinsic means a purpose is imposed by something external. For instance, we say a fork has the purpose of eating because we designed it that way. Teleology is a debated topic, particularly in science. Competitive peace studies is a subfield of peace studies that focuses on the use of competition to achieve peaceful outcomes. It examines how states and other actors can compete for influence, resources, and power in ways that do not lead to violence. The field draws on a variety of disciplines, including political science, economics, history, and psychology. It examines a range of competitive mechanisms, such as elections, trade agreements, and arms races. Leaders who are skilled at managing competition can help to prevent conflict. Leaders who are committed to peaceful outcomes can create incentives for cooperation and build trust between rivals. Competitive peace studies is a relatively new field, but it has grown in importance in recent years. The rise of globalization has increased the number of interactions between states, and this has led to a greater need for understanding how to manage competition peacefully. Collective modification and collective excitation are both terms used in physics to describe how groups of particles or systems behave together. This term refers to the situation where a group of particles or a system undergoes a change in its properties due to interactions between its components. Collective modification can happen due to various forces or interactions, such as electromagnetic forces in materials like superconductors. Chemical interactions that lead to the formation of new molecules and biological processes where cells communicate and modify each other's behavior. Collective excitation describes a situation where a group of particles or a system is energetically pushed to a higher energy state compared to its ground state lowest energy state. This push often happens by adding energy in a specific way. A good example is light interacting with atoms. When light shines on an atom, the atom's electrons can absorb the energy and jump to a higher energy level. On account of their dual natures of specialty and generality, these functions should be the subject of a separate science. Some of its parts have been studied for a long time, because this kind of research, in which man could be the main subject, has always presented the greatest interest. Physiology, hygiene, medicine, psychology, animal history, human history, political economy, morality, etc. represent fragments of a science that we would like to establish, but as fragments scattered and uncoordinated have remained until now only parts of particular sciences. They should be joined together and made whole in order to highlight the order of the whole and its unity. Now you have a science, so far unnamed, which we propose to call praxeology from pyro alpha xi iota, action, or by referring to the influence of the environment, mesology from mu epsilon sigma omicron, environment. Louis Bourdeau Théorie des Sciences, Plan de Science Intégrale in 1882. Small government, also referred to as limited government, is a political philosophy that advocates for minimal intervention by the state in the lives of its citizens. Supporters believe individuals should have maximum freedom to make their own choices, pursue their goals, and manage their affairs with minimal restrictions. The government's primary function should be to protect individual liberties and enforce contracts. This might include national defense, law enforcement, and a court system. Small government theory generally favors lower taxes, less government spending, and a balanced budget. Supporters believe a free market, with minimal government regulation, is the most efficient way to allocate resources and drive economic growth. Less government bureaucracy can lead to more efficient allocation of resources. Reduced regulation can encourage innovation and economic growth. Individuals are more likely to be responsible for themselves when the government doesn't provide a safety net. Small government theory is a complex and debated topic. Understanding its core principles and arguments is important for informed political discourse. Sociofugal describes spaces designed to discourage social interaction and prioritize individual focus or privacy. It's the opposite of sociopedal, which refers to spaces that encourage interaction and connection. The term sociofugal comes from the work of psychiatrist Humphrey Osmond in the 1950s. He used it alongside sociopedal to explore how the design of spaces influences human behavior. An ideal environment likely offers a mix of both sociofugal and sociopedal spaces. This allows people to choose the setting that best suits their needs at a particular time. For example, an office might have dedicated quiet zones alongside collaborative work areas. Interactional territory is a place where people congregate informally. Home territory is a place where people continuously have control over their individual territory. Body territory is the space immediately surrounding us. Anthropologist Edward T. Hall coined the term proxemics in the 1960s. He also identified 4 major distance zones that people use in communication. Intimate zone 0 to 1.5 feet, reserved for close relationships, family, romantic partners, and confidants. Personal zone 1.5 to 4 feet, common for conversations with friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. Social zone 4 to 12 feet, used for business interactions, public gatherings, or maintaining a polite distance with strangers. Public zone over 12 feet, for addressing large audiences or maintaining a significant distance in impersonal situations. Both Pierre Bourdieu and Robert Putnam are influential sociologists who explored the concept of social capital, but they have distinct approaches. Putnam sees social capital as a collective asset that fosters trust, civic engagement, and cooperation within communities. Bourdieu views social capital as a form of power and resource unequally distributed within society. Social capital is like strong community spirit, where people trust each other and work together for the common good. Social capital is like having the right connections that give you access to advantages others might not have. Capital budgeting is the process of allocating funds for infrastructure projects, property acquisition, or equipment purchases. Capital framework are guidelines for evaluating and approving capital expenditure projects, ensuring they align with long-term goals and financial sustainability. In a broad sense, manuals can be considered a form of capital. They represent codified knowledge and procedures that improve efficiency and productivity. Traditionally, market economies rely on buying and selling goods and services for personal gain. Gift economies prioritize social connection and mutual benefit over individual profit. However, some argue that elements of both systems can coexist in modern societies. Gift-based capital accumulation. This interpretation suggests using the principles of a gift economy to accumulate capital for a common good. Individuals contribute resources, time, skills, or even physical goods to a shared pool. The accumulated capital is then used for investments that benefit the entire community. This could involve starting a cooperative business, purchasing shared resources like tools or land, or funding community projects. While there's no expectation of immediate return for individual contributions, the system relies on a sense of reciprocity and long-term benefit for the community. These organizations pool resources to acquire land and make it available for affordable housing or community gardens. The dear enemy effect is a captivating concept in animal behavior, describing how territorial animals show less aggression towards familiar neighbors compared to complete strangers venturing into their territory. This behavior strategy offers advantages for territorial animals. Constant battles with neighbors are energetically expensive. By recognizing and tolerating them, animals conserve energy for more significant threats like predators or competition for mates outside their territory. Additionally, established neighbors may act as a buffer zone against intruders, deterring them from venturing deeper. This effect has been observed across a wide range of animals, including birdsong sparrows defending their singing territories, mammals mongooses marking boundaries with scent, fish damselfish defending coral reefs, and even insects ants recognizing neighboring colonies. Recognition isn't always perfect. Injured or sick neighbors might be seen as weaker and thus targeted. Additionally, young animals venturing out might not be readily recognized, leading to initial aggression until familiarity is established. ISO 10002:2018, Quality Management, Customer Satisfaction, Guidelines for Complaints. ISO 10253, Ecotoxicity Testing. ISO 11348, Genotoxicity Testing. ISO 9001:2015, Quality Management Systems, Requirements. ISO 37001:2016, Anti-Bribery Management Systems, Requirements with Guidance for Use. Both self-efficacy and locus of control are important psychological concepts that influence our thoughts, behaviors, and overall well-being. Self-efficacy refers to a person's belief in their capabilities to achieve a specific goal or overcome challenges. It's essentially your confidence in your ability to succeed. Someone with high self-efficacy believes they can master new skills, handle difficult situations, and achieve their goals. Locus of control refers to the extent to which people believe they have control over the events that affect their lives. People with an internal locus of control believe their actions and decisions significantly influence their outcomes. They feel empowered to take charge and create their own success. People with an external locus of control believe external factors like luck, fate, or other people are primarily responsible for their outcomes. They might feel less control over their lives and more susceptible to external forces. The parallel economy is an informal economy that exists within a formal government-regulated economy. It refers to the activities of individuals or groups who engage in exchange or other financial interactions outside of government control. Parallel economies often develop in response to government policies and regulations that create barriers to doing business or limit people's freedoms. They may also offer alternative ways to obtain goods and services, allowing people to access or engage in economic activities that would otherwise be unavailable or restricted. The informal economy is a large and growing sector, particularly in developing countries. It is estimated that the informal economy accounts for up to 1/3 of global GDP. The informal economy can provide important economic opportunities for people who are unable to find work in the formal sector. On the positive side, the informal economy can provide jobs and income for people who would otherwise be unemployed or underemployed. It can also help to meet the needs of consumers who cannot afford goods and services from the formal sector. The monochronic-polychronic continuum is a concept used to describe cultural differences in how people perceive and value time. At one end, monochronic cultures prioritize doing one thing at a time and value strict schedules, deadlines, and punctuality. They tend to be linear in their thinking, focusing on completing tasks sequentially. On the other end, polychronic cultures are more comfortable multitasking and dealing with interruptions. Schedules are seen as flexible, and relationships and personal obligations often take precedence over strict adherence to time. How someone perceives time can vary depending on the situation. Cultural norms around time can evolve over time. Globalization and increased cross-cultural interactions can influence how people perceive and utilize time. Chronemics is the exciting field that explores how time is used in communication, both verbally and non-verbally. It dives into how we perceive, structure, and use time to convey messages and shape interactions. The immune system is a vast network of cells, tissues, and organs working together to defend the body from pathogens. Each immune cell acts as a simple agent, following pre-programmed instructions but also responding to the environment. When tissues get damaged or infected, immune cells release chemical signals, cytokines, that attract other immune cells to the area. This accumulation of cells and their continued signaling creates a localized inflammatory response, a hallmark of the immune system fighting infection. B cells, responsible for antibody production, interact with other immune cells like T cells through signaling molecules. This interaction educates the B cells to produce specific antibodies against the invading pathogen. The combined response of many B cells and T cells leads to the development of a targeted immune response. The immune system remembers past encounters with pathogens. When the same pathogen is encountered again, these memory cells quickly respond, leading to a faster and more effective immune response. Second-order cybernetics, also referred to as the cybernetics of cybernetics, is a way of thinking about cybernetics that takes the observer into account. Unlike traditional first-order cybernetics that focuses on the system being observed, second-order cybernetics acknowledges the observer's role in influencing the observed system. It emphasizes the reflexive nature of cybernetics, meaning the observer themselves is part of the system they are studying. This can impact the observations and conclusions drawn. Pioneered by Heinz von Foerster and others, it emerged as a critique of traditional cybernetics and brought in ideas from fields like epistemology, the study of knowledge. Some key terms associated with second-order cybernetics include constructivism. We construct our understanding of the world and the map is not the territory. Our observations are not the reality itself. The scientist realizes that their presence and methods of observation might be affecting the ant colony's behavior. They consider how their actions are part of the system they are studying. The totality of beliefs and sentiments common to the average members of a society forms a determinate system with a life of its own. It can be termed the collective or common consciousness. Émile Durkheim. Anomie, also spelled anomie, is a sociological concept that refers to a state of instability resulting from a breakdown of social norms and values. It describes a situation where the traditional rules and expectations that guide behavior are weakened or unclear. This can happen on a societal level or on an individual level. The concept of anomie is most associated with French sociologist Émile Durkheim. He introduced it in his works, particularly Suicide 1897, to explain rising suicide rates during periods of social upheaval. American sociologist Robert K. Merton later expanded on Durkheim's ideas. He focused on the strain caused by the disconnect between cultural goals, e.g. success, and the legitimate means to achieve them, e.g. education, hard work. This strain, he argued, could lead to anomie and deviant behavior. Non-alienated labor describes work that is the opposite of Marx's alienated labor. It represents a state where workers find fulfillment and meaning in their work. Habitat selection theory focuses on how organisms choose the environments they live in. Investors have a preference for bonds with specific maturity lengths. This theory helps explain why the yield curve, which shows interest rates for bonds of varying maturities, typically slopes upwards. Kaizen, the Japanese philosophy of continuous improvement through small changes, can be a powerful tool to achieve long-term behavioral rise. Kaizen emphasizes breaking down large behavioral goals into tiny, achievable steps. This makes progress feel manageable and motivates you to keep going, fostering a sense of behavioral rise. Kaizen isn't about achieving perfection, it's about constantly making small improvements. This steady, incremental progress leads to significant behavioral rise over time. Kaizen encourages reflecting on what's working and what's not. This allows you to adapt your approach and continuously find ways to improve your behaviors, leading to sustained behavioral rise. By consistently practicing small positive behaviors, Kaizen helps turn them into habits, solidifying your behavioral rise. Social dominance theory (SDT) is a social psychology theory that attempts to explain the prevalence of social hierarchies and group-based inequalities. It argues that humans naturally form social groups, and that some groups wind up dominating others. This creates a social pyramid, with the ruling class at the top and subordinate groups below. Social dominance theory also proposes that these hierarchies are justified by widely shared cultural ideologies, or legitimizing myths. These myths can take many forms, but they all serve to make the dominance of certain groups seem natural and inevitable. Social dominance theory is a controversial theory, but it has been influential in helping us to understand the roots of prejudice and discrimination. It suggests that these problems are not simply the result of individuals, but rather that they are deeply embedded in our social systems. Common in-group identity is a concept in social psychology that focuses on reducing prejudice between groups. It sits within the broader theory of the common in-group identity model (CIIM), developed by researchers Gertner and Davidio. People naturally categorize themselves and others into groups, us in-group versus them out-group. This can lead to bias favoring the in-group. CIIM suggests that intergroup bias can be reduced by creating a new, more inclusive group identity. This involves seeing oneself and others as part of a larger we instead of separate groups. Overall, the idea behind common in-group identity is to move away from the us versus them mentality and create a more inclusive group perspective. This can help reduce prejudice and promote more positive interactions between different groups. Superordinate identity. Rough inclusive group is called a superordinate identity. It could be a broader category that encompasses both original groups, e.g. all employees in a company instead of just marketing or engineering. By age 5, children begin to understand their place within a group in-group and the group's position in society's status quo. This awareness can lead to a tendency to uphold the existing social order, which aligns with the concept of system justification. System justification is a psychological motive where people feel a need to view the social, economic, and political systems they depend on as fair and legitimate. A preference for the familiar and established social order can provide a sense of stability and predictability for young children. It helps them navigate a complex world with clear rules. Understanding social hierarchies can help children learn the norms and expectations of their group, fostering successful social integration. The concept of justified domestication is a complex one, and there isn't a universally agreed upon definition of what constitutes justification. But instead of selective breeding by another species, humans themselves acted as the selective force. The just world hypothesis, also sometimes called the just world fallacy, is a cognitive bias that centers around the idea that the world is fair and people get what they deserve. It boils down to the belief that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. People inherently want to believe the world operates on a system of moral balance. This gives us a sense of order and predictability in a complex world. The just world hypothesis suggests that people's actions have corresponding consequences. Good deeds are rewarded and bad deeds are punished. When faced with unfortunate events, the just world hypothesis can lead people to search for reasons why someone might deserve their suffering. This can manifest as victim blaming. It's important to note that the just world hypothesis is not always accurate. The world can be a random and unfair place, and bad things can happen to good people. We should work toward a universal linked information system, in which generality and portability are more important than fancy graphics techniques and complex extra facilities. Tim Berners-Lee, Averroes 1126–1198, a prominent Islamic philosopher, proposed the theory of the unity of the intellect. This theory suggests that all humans share a single intellect, rather than each having their own. This theory aimed to explain how universal knowledge is possible within the framework of Aristotelian philosophy of mind. Material intellect is like a blank slate, receptive to forms and possessing the potential for knowledge. Active intellect is an external, immaterial intellect that acts upon the material intellect, drawing out its potential for understanding. According to Averroes, the material intellect is singular and shared by all humans. This single material intellect interacts with the active intellect to achieve understanding. This theory has implications for individuality and personal identity. Some argue it undermines the idea of a unique soul or mind for each person. Reviewing the strands of intellectual history that contributed to the global brain hypothesis, Francis Halion distinguishes four perspectives: organicism, encycloptism, emergentism, and evolutionary cybernetics. He asserts that these developed in relative independence but now are converging in his own scientific reformulation. Collective Stigmergy combines two ideas to describe how a group, through indirect interactions, can achieve complex tasks or create intricate structures. Imagine a group working on a project. Each person contributes their ideas, actions, or creations, leaving a kind of mark on the overall process. These marks don't necessarily involve direct communication. They could be physical outputs like code written, shared knowledge, or even established norms within the group. As the group interacts with these marks left by others, a collective intelligence emerges. They build upon each other's work, refine the overall project, and adjust their actions based on what's already been done. In Carl Jung's collective unconscious theory, the concept of archetypes is central. Collective unconscious refers to a shared memory or experience that transcends individuals and generations. Archetypes are universal symbols expressed through imagery that reflect this shared subconscious experience. Unconscious forces emerge in dreams and visions that represent these archetypes. This research examined the interpretation of the pragmatic markers literally and figuratively when they followed familiar and unfamiliar proverbs, e.g., birds of a feather will flock together, literally. Event-related brain potential methodology was used to measure costs associated with interpreting the markers during online comprehension, and an offline task provided additional insight into how sensible the markers were in the proverbial contexts, and 400 potentials revealed that literally was less semantically congruent than figuratively with familiar and unfamiliar proverbial contexts, and differences in late positive potentials showed that resolving the interpretation of markers inconsistent with the salient meaning of the proverbs was more difficult following unfamiliar than familiar proverbs. Sensibility ratings showed that literally was less sensible than figuratively following both types of proverbs, and that both markers were more sensible following familiar proverbs. These results have implications for understanding how people interpret the pragmatic intent of these markers when they appear after the figurative statements they modify, and highlight the sensitivity of the markers to context. PSYC Info Database Record C 2021 APA, all rights reserved, Abstract, Ferretti, Todd R. Deanna C. Hall, and Fadi Mansur. Interpreting Pragmatic Markers Following Proverbs. Canadian Journal of Experimental Psychology Review Canadienne de Psychologie Experimentale 75.2 2021, 197. Participant observation is a research method used in social sciences, particularly anthropology, sociology, and communication studies. It involves a researcher actively participating in the daily life of a specific group or community they are studying, while simultaneously observing and recording their behaviors, interactions, and cultural practices. The researcher becomes embedded within the group, attending events, participating in activities, and potentially even living alongside them for an extended period. This allows for first-hand experience and observation of the group's natural behaviors. The researcher plays a dual role, as a participant and an observer. They need to balance actively engaging with the group while maintaining a critical and objective perspective to gather unbiased data. Throughout the process, the researcher collects data through various methods like taking detailed field notes, recording interviews or conversations, and potentially even audio or video recordings with ethical considerations. The researcher fully integrates into the group, revealing their research purpose only if necessary. Since this is an era when many people are concerned about fairness and social justice, what is your fair share of what someone else has worked for? Thomas Sowell. During the socialist era, agriculture was primarily collectivized. This meant that farmers Gosederstvenje auf Irma state farms or Kolkhozy collective farms worked large plots of land together. Profits were shared by the collective, not individual farmers. After the fall of socialism, many of these collective and state farms were dismantled. Land was divided up, and farmers were given the opportunity to farm independently on smaller plots of land. This was a major shift, as many farmers had never known anything but collective agriculture, having a complex connection to the region's socialist past totalitarian flower pavilion. The focus is on how these structures reflect the dubious, uncertain or questionable post-socialist legacy. This legacy might be the lingering influence of socialist ideology on urban spaces, or the challenges of integrating those spaces into a post-communist world. How do these flower pavilions embody or contradict the ideals of the former socialist regimes? Are they seen as relics of the past or attempts to integrate socialist elements into new urban designs? Rich data refers to the quantity and detail of information collected during research. It's about having a comprehensive picture of the phenomenon you're studying. Extensive field notes from participant observation, detailed interview transcripts, in-depth surveys with open-ended questions, and a variety of multimedia data. Rich data provides a broader and deeper understanding of the research topic. It allows researchers to identify patterns, themes, and nuances that might be missed with more limited data. Thick description goes beyond just the data itself. Thick description goes beyond just the data itself. It's about interpreting and contextualizing the data to provide a richer understanding of the phenomenon. The goal of thick description is to create a more nuanced and insightful picture of the phenomenon under study. It aims to capture not just the what but also the why and how behind human behavior and cultural practices. Cross-disciplinary consolidation and keeping conjecture in check are two important, yet sometimes conflicting, aspects of scientific advancement. This refers to the process of merging knowledge and methodologies from different disciplines to tackle complex problems. Neuroscience and psychology collaborating to understand consciousness. Engineering and biology working together on biomimicry designing based on nature. Conjecture is essentially an educated guess or hypothesis. It's a crucial starting point for scientific inquiry. However, unchecked conjecture can lead to speculation and unsubstantiated claims. The classic example of two coupled pendulums physically connected, where small changes in one can drastically affect the other's motion. Overall, the meaning of cross-order theory depends on the context. In physics, particularly supersymmetric gauge theories, it refers to relations between different orders of perturbative expansion. In neuroscience, it might be related to the speculative cross-order integration hypothesis about consciousness. Conclusion. I took him Lawrence Bragg to a young zoologist working on pattern formation in insect cuticles. The zoologist explained how disturbances introduced into these regular patterns pointed to their formation being governed by some kind of gradient. Bragg listened attentively and then exclaimed, "Your disturbed gradient behaves like a stream of sand running downhill and encountering an obstacle." "Good heavens," replied the zoologist, "I had been working on this problem for years before this simple analogy occurred to me, and you think of it after 20 minutes. Max Ferdinand Peretz. Relation to distributive justice, fair allocation of resources and its implications within and beyond national borders. The state justifies its use of force coercion through its role in achieving distributive justice, fair distribution of resources. Only a state with the power to coerce can ensure this fair distribution. Coercion by the state is either fully justified because it's necessary for individual autonomy, freedom to make choices. Or, if coercion isn't fully justified, then achieving fair distribution through the state might not be possible either. However, achieving political equality, equal rights and influence might still be a viable option. Coercion theory doesn't simply advocate for global equality, everyone having the same. It suggests a more complex scenario with significant international obligations. This surprising outcome stems from the theory's hidden foundation, a natural duty of justice perspective on why people owe allegiance to the state. This perspective emphasizes inherent obligations to a just system. General strain theory (GST) is a sociological theory that attempts to explain why people commit crime. It was developed by Robert Agnew in the early 1990s and is considered one of the leading theories of crime today. The core idea of GST is that people who experience strain are more likely to commit crime. Strain can be defined as any negative experience that creates pressure or incentive to engage in criminal behavior. According to GST, strain does not inevitably lead to crime. However, it does increase the likelihood of crime by creating negative emotions such as anger, frustration, and depression. These negative emotions can then motivate people to engage in criminal behavior in order to cope with the strain they are experiencing. GST differs from other theories of crime in a few key ways. First, it focuses on negative emotions as a key mechanism linking strain to crime. Second, it emphasizes the importance of how people perceive strain. Third, it is a general theory that can be applied to a wide range of criminal behavior. ISO 3744 uses sound pressure level SPL measurement, which is the traditional method and relies on microphones. ISO 9614 employs sound intensity measurement, a more advanced technique that considers both pressure and particle velocity of sound waves. ISO 3744 can be used in reverberation chambers or free field environments. ISO 9614, primarily used in free field environments. In the field of network science, scale-free networks SFNs are a specific type of network structure found in nature and technology. These networks exhibit a property where few nodes have a very large number of connections hubs, while most nodes have only a few connections. When discussing SFNs in an environmental context, it might refer to analyzing the connections and interactions within an ecosystem. For instance, researchers might study how the loss of a keystone species, a hub in the ecological network, impacts the entire ecosystem. In a broader sense, scale-free environments could describe environments where the concept of scale itself is not particularly relevant. Microscopic environments at the atomic and subatomic level, the notion of size and scale can become quite complex. Highly abstract environments, conceptual or mathematical models, might not have a physical scale associated with them. This refers to the process where a system, initially in a disordered state, spontaneously forms some kind of order or structure through local interactions between its parts. Uniform diffusion refers to the process by which particles or molecules distribute themselves evenly throughout a space. Anthropological diffusion refers to the spread of cultural traits, ideas, customs, technologies, and more, from one society to another. It's how particle substances are same species secreted to the outside by an individual and received from an area of organs high in concentration to an area of low concentration. Adults have no functioning vomeronasal organ, which processes pheromone signals in animals overall. Diffusion can happen through trade, migration, warfare, or even through indirect means, observing neighboring distance. Whether a society adopts a diffused trait depends on its usefulness and how well it fits with their existing cultural framework. Diffusion can lead to cultural change, but the borrowed trait might be modified or adapted to the receiving society's needs. Our perception of how much social inequality exists isn't just based on objective facts, but also on our own beliefs about equality egalitarianism and inequality anti-egalitarianism. This means that people can perceive different levels of hierarchy, even when presented with the same information. This refers to our underlying beliefs about social equality. Egalitarians believe in equal opportunities and rights for all, while anti-egalitarians believe in some form of social hierarchy. Our beliefs about equality or inequality influence how much social inequality we perceive in the world around us. Focusing solely on contribution can lead to burnout. If you're constantly giving to others and neglecting your own well-being, it's difficult to sustain your efforts and find joy in them. While contentment is important, a life solely focused on personal satisfaction can lack purpose. Permeating like you're making a positive commodity can be a source of motivation and fulfillment. Sampling to estimate the probability of a rare event in an MM1 tandem queue. This rare event is reaching a large total number of customers during a busy cycle. Arrivals follow a Poisson distribution memoryless. Service times follow a Poisson distribution memoryless. There is a single server at each stage tandem. This refers to a period where the queuing system is continuously busy, meaning there's always at least one customer in the system. Research focuses on developing a method to modify the probability distribution change of measure for importance sampling using subsolutions. This aims to improve the efficiency of estimating the rare event probability compared to existing methods. Applied to a two-stage tandem queue and shown that it achieves better asymptotic efficiency than previously known approaches. A school of thought that tries to bridge the gap. It argues that true socialism should be built on humanist principles, ensuring individual freedoms alongside economic equality. The challenge lies in achieving both economic fairness and individual liberty. Inalienable possession has a well-defined meaning in linguistics. It refers to a type of possession where a noun inherently belongs to something else and can't be independent. Inalienable means something that cannot be given away, sold, or separated. Possession refers to the relationship between something being possessed and the possessor that owns it. Inalienable possession focuses on nouns that must be possessed by something. These nouns can't exist independently because they are fundamentally linked to their possessor. Your leg is always your leg even if it's injured. Your mother is always your mother, even if you don't live together. And part-whole relationships is the top of a table is always part of the table. These nouns can't exist independently because they are fundamentally linked to their possessor. Everyone has inherent rights and ownership over their well-being, contrasting with hierarchical structures where power and resources are concentrated in the hands of a few. References: Christensen, Lars Rune. The Logic of Practices of Stigmergy, Representational Artifacts in Architectural Design. Proceedings of the 2008 ACM Conference on Computer-Supported Cooperative Work. 2008 Siefkes, Christian. The Emergence of Benefit-Driven Production. OK Khan. 2011 Kuriking, Alexei. The Self-Organizing Fractal Theory as a Universal Discovery Method, The Phenomenon of Life. Theoretical Biology and Medical Modeling A 2011, 1-66. Dippel, Aidan, Carrie Raymond, and Michael Docherty. General Theory of Stigmergy, Modeling Stigma Semantics. Cognitive Systems Research 31 2014, 61-92. Alborghetti, Paolo, and Alessio Irioli. Stigmergy-based parasitic strategies in architectural design for the transformation of existing heritage. Systema 3.2 2015, 80-90. Mijak, Jennifer, Takao Noguchi, and Nick Chittier. Instantaneous Conventions, The Emergence of Flexible Communicative Signals. Psychological Science 27.12 2016, 1550-1561. Su, Xiaoan, et al. An Orderly Personality partially explains the link between trait disgust and political conservatism. Cognition and Emotion 2019. Su, Singh, et al. Brain-Inspired Stigmergy Learning. IEEE Access 7 2019, 54410-54424. Hunt, Edmund R. Simon Jones, and Sabina Howard. Testing the Limits of Pheromone Stigmergy in High-Density Robot Swarms. Royal Society Open Science 6.11 2019, 190,225. Alfio, Antonio L. et al. An adaptive Stigmergy-based system for evaluating technological indicator dynamics in the context of smart specialization. AR14 preprint AR14 1901.00553 2019. Nikoi, Hati, et al. Continuous coordination as a realistic scenario for lifelong learning. International Conference on Machine Learning. PMLR, 2021. Amari, Nicola. Social Justice in Counseling Psychology Practice, Actualizing the Ethics of Compassion. Journal of Humanistic Psychology, Volume 0, Number 0, 2021, pages 1x Evans, Anthony M. Hans Rosenbusch, and Marcel Zeelenberg. Using semantic similarity to understand the psychological constructs related to processually. Current Opinion in Psychology 44 2022, 226 to 230. Osuna Enciso, Valentin, and Elizabeth Guevara Martinez. A Stigmergy-based differential evolution. Applied Sciences 12.12 2022, 6093. Hodgson, James. Potent Connections, Mystery Work and the Relational Nature of Retreat Going. The Sociological Review 70.1 2022, 199 to 214. El Sayadawi, Noran, and Erica N. Carlson. Is meta-accuracy consistent across levels of acquaintanceship? Social Psychological and Personality Science 13.1 2022, 178 to 185. Zheng, Lei, et al. Stigmergy in Open Collaboration, an empirical investigation based on Wikipedia. Journal of Management Information Systems 40.3 2023, 983, 1008. Pectolides, Yanis, et al. The Rhizomatic Learning Process of Educational Commons. New Directions in Rhizomatic Learning. Routledge, 2023. 179 to 197. Sutter Luddy, Simon, and Stefan Meritz. Commonism. Make Capitalism History, a Practical Framework for Utopia and the Transformation of Society. Chem, Springer International Publishing, 2023. 141 to 189. Wang, Yuan Kai. The Stigmergic City, Reinterpreting Eco-Utopia Model with Stigmergic Behavior. IPE Conference Proceedings. Volume 2928. Number 1. IPE Publishing, 2023. Di Pietro, Viviana, et al. The Inheritance of Alternative Nest Architectural Traditions in Stingless Bees. Current Biology 2024. Tucker, Alexander. Synthetic Systems Engineering SSE, A New Frontier in Applied Physics. Available at SSRN 476-3676. Li, Yuan Feng, et al. Stigmergy and Hierarchical Learning for Routing Optimization in Multi-Domain Collaborative Satellite Networks. IEEE Journal on Selected Areas in Communications 2024.